Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Racial Reconciliation Forum tonight. And I'm going to leave the introductions to Kiana, but I wanted to just introduce myself. I'm Ann Wolf of the Contra Costa Bar Association, and I'm your technical and housekeeping person for the evening. So if anything goes wrong, you can blame me, and I'll just blame Zoom. But I wanted to let everybody know that we're going to be running a poll. In fact, I'm going to do that right now while I'm talking, so we don't have to interrupt anybody else. And in order to get your MCLE certificate, we need you to fill out the poll, and there'll be one at the end, so we certify that you attended, and we can do it that way. And your attendance certificates and any materials that I have, and anything that the speakers still want to give me, I have some. I will be sending out in a day or so, so don't panic until next week. Let's see, we've got the poll going. Kiana, I'll turn it over to you. You're muted, darling.
Good evening. My name is Kiana Washington. I am a member of the Contra Costa County Bar Association Board of Directors and the chair of the Racial Reconciliation Forum Planning Committee. This is our third annual forum, and let's just introduce our panelists. Venus Johnson will be moderating our panel this evening. Venus began her career as Deputy District Attorney in Alameda County. After 8 years, she left Alameda County and joined the California Department of Justice, where she served under former Attorney General Kamala D. Harris as her legislative advisor and subsequently as her chief of staff. In 2017, Venus joined Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf's office and served as Director of Public Safety. In 2018, Venus joined the District Attorney's Office under Diana Becton and is currently Assistant District Attorney, or actually was Assistant District Attorney and promoted to Chief Assistant in 2019. Next, we have Audrey G. Audrey attended the University of California at Berkeley and received her Bachelor of Arts in History. She went to law school at Santa Clara University, receiving a Juris Doctorate degree. Audrey is a trusted advisor to businesses and their management team. She's a partner at
Brown, G. and Wenger.
Thank you. I was forgetting the first name. And provides sound legal advice on issues ranging from personnel disputes to corporate governance, chess matches, and charting a path to early resolution or powered litigation to win. Audrey was named as the inaugural Outstanding Woman Lawyer by the Contra Costa County Bar Association Women's Section in 2018. She is also past president of the Contra Costa County Bar Association. Nichelle Holmes currently serves as District Attorney in the Contra Costa District Attorney's Office in their Human Trafficking Unit. Ms. Holmes received her BA with honors in sociology from Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. She received her JD from the University of San Francisco School of Law in 2010 and was admitted to the State of California Bar in December 2010. Ms. Holmes is the president of the Charles Houston Bar Association, co-president of the Bay Area Black Prosecutors Association, and currently finished a 4-year term as member of the University of San Francisco School of Law Board of Governors. She is proud recipient of the 2013 Misdemeanor Prosecutor of the Year Award, 2015 Minority Bar Coalition Diversity Awards, and 2017 Charles Houston President's Award. Ms. Holmes is one of the founding members of BABPA and continues to work tirelessly to bring diversity to the legal profession, as well as promote justice and fairness in the criminal justice system. She was proudly born and raised in Richmond, California. Tracy Clark graduated from the University of San Francisco School of Law and is a Bay Area native. Since graduating from law school, she has committed her entire legal career to serving in the area of public interest, representing the disadvantaged and disenfranchised members of the community. Her employment with the Contra Costa Public Defender's Office began in 1997. While employed with the office, she has served in many assignments representing hundreds of misdemeanor, felony, and juvenile clients from arraignment through jury trial. In 2001, she went back to work for the San Francisco Public Defender's Office, but later returned to the Contra Costa Public Defender's Office in 2004 and is currently a senior felony deputy. Tracy is currently assigned to the post-conviction unit, where she provides representation to incarcerated prison inmates who are post-conviction and now eligible for early parole consideration under the youthful offender statute pursuant to People versus Franklin. In addition to her duties as a senior felony deputy, she has also assisted in recruiting new talent to the office, served as a mentor and instructor in the Richmond High School Pegasus program, and has served as a moot court judge and advisor, and is currently the Contra Costa County Public Defender Association's vice president. We next have Joanie Hiramoto, who is a Superior Court judge. Judge Hiramoto received her undergraduate degree from Harvard. She went to Bolt Law School, currently known as UC Berkeley Law School. And prior to being appointed to the bench, Judge Hiramoto was a litigation associate at McCutcheon, Doyle, Brown, and Ernestson in San Francisco. She was a branch chief of the Enforcement Division of the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. Judge Hiramoto was appointed by Pete Wilson on March 11th, 1998 to the municipal court in Contra Costa County and elevated by unification to the Superior Court in June of 1998. Judge Hiramoto has held various assignments in the Contra Costa County Superior Court, including criminal trials and family law. Judge Hiramoto also teaches judicial ethics and chairs the Judicial Bias Committee. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We welcome you to the panel, and take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. We are excited to really just have a conversation this evening. This is an extremely important topic. I think that you will find it is unique, that I, as the moderator, and you have 4 exceptionally qualified women who you will get perspectives from based on their differing backgrounds and their different life experiences. But it is not lost on me, and it shouldn't be lost on you, that you will hear from a very powerful panel group of women this evening. So in light of that, why don't we kind of just get started, ladies? You know, I think when we think about racial reconciliation, right, the word reconciliation really means to heal, to bring together, right, to reconcile. But I guess before you can reconcile something, you need to address what the actual issue is, and the issues and the challenges really need to be identified. I'd like to ask each of you just to take a moment to discuss from your personal perspectives, you know, what is the challenge that we're trying to reconcile when it comes to race in the legal profession? It's a broad topic. It's a loaded question probably, but I think it's an important one. You obviously, the first step to fixing a problem is actually recognizing there is a problem. So from each of your perspectives, why don't we just begin that way? And Audrey, I'll begin with you, and then we can just go on from there.
Sure. It's a loaded question. I know there's lots of different perspectives on it. Certainly when we look around in terms of not just our county, but, you know, broader in terms of the legal profession, and I'm a civil practitioner. So when I look around, I want to see, you know, who are the people in power and who are the people who are running the law firms, and are they actually people of color? Are they people who are on the management committee? Are they people who are in charge of the compensation committee? Are they, are people just in small firms, or have they been, maybe marginalized, or they had to go out on their own because they couldn't find success in a big firm and you had to go out into being a solo firm? I want to see parity and equity where people of color are elevated into those positions of power, and to see more of it. That's what I'd like to see.
Nichelle, how about you?
It's a loaded question. I don't know how each of us are probably going to say that, but I've always been a big proponent. We need to at least have the conversation, right? At least start the conversation. But I've experienced in my office or in the county of Contra Costa that there's just a resistance to that. And if we want to have a conversation about implicit bias or, microaggressions, that somehow I'm calling you a racist, which is not necessarily the case. We all have the implicit bias. So it's hard to even really dive into the issue when people don't even want to have the conversation. So that's kind of been my frustration. Our office has had a couple different trainings as it relates to implicit bias and those types of things under different leaderships. One was under Mark Peterson, and the resistance to the training was astonishing. I couldn't even understand why people are resistant to just having the conversation. And to kind of tag on to Audrey's point, the system that's set up in Contra Costa, at least at the DA's office, is that you'll very rarely have a person of color in a supervisory position because of the contract system. They have to promote up, which could be 10 years. So unless you bring somebody that's a number 2, or you are the DA, you're probably not going to stay there long enough to be in a 5 position, because it just takes too long. So just by the very nature of the system, you are eliminating the possibility to have people of color in those positions.
Thank you. Tracy, how about you?
Yeah, I think I also kind of share and would like to echo the sentiments of Audrey and Nichelle. I think part of the problem that I've seen in Contra Costa County is a lack of inclusivity. I think that it is difficult to have the conversations about race, about inclusiveness, because people are resistant to it. The other issue or problem that I've seen that has been a little frustrating for me is that because I am a person of color, because I am a woman of color, my allies who are not people of color expect me to help fix the problem. And it's frustrating because while I would like to be part of the solution to the problem, I don't have all of the answers. And it's difficult when they come to me and ask, well, what can we do? What should I do? I find myself, unfortunately, becoming very, very frustrated because I can't fix this for them, for us. I know that the conversations need to be had. I know that people are very uncomfortable talking about race. I know that it's very difficult for people to reflect inward and even face the fact that they may have some implicit bias. But until we have the conversation, we can't even remotely come up with a resolution or a solution to the problem.
Thank you. Judge Hiramoto, please, love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. The first point I would like to make is extending Tracy Clark's last point, this idea of representing. I am one of 2 Asian judges on the bench, and that does not mean that I have the answers to what it means to the Asian community to make certain changes, certain policy changes, or if we're doing outreach, how to do that. the Asian community is so incredibly diverse, just like the Black community, just like the Hispanic community, Latinx. I mean, it's so the amount of diversity that we have on a racial level or in gender diversity is really, I think, not enough to have the capital that we need to really change the comfort level of discussions and to even having these discussions. It has to come from the top in any organization. I think that's the first point. The second point for me is, I think one reason people have discomfort around racial issues is, for example, because by making these arguments, it seems like an implicit attack against the majority, i.e. white people or men or both. And it really isn't. This whole idea that equality for others means less for the majority. Somehow it seems like it's a threat for some people, not for everybody. But when I was appointed in 1998, Justice Sonia Sotomayor had made this statement about how she would hope that a wise Latina would make better decisions than a white male judge who had not had those same life experiences. And I admire Justice Sotomayor and her jurisprudence, and I have that book, a signed copy, but I respectfully disagree with that. I am not going to make a better decision than a white male because I am an Asian female. Because to me, the things that make a really good judge transcend gender and race. The things that make a really good judge are things like, how well are you able to listen to both sides? How well are you able to embrace points of view other than your own? How well are you to walk in shoes that you don't fit? How well are you, how able are you to relate to situations you've never been in? Because all of us have situations that we're comfortable with, whether it's cultural, whether it's ethnic, whether it's related to a religion or something, and situations that we don't know. And I encounter cultural situations that I'm not familiar with all the time. So I'm not going to make a better decision because I'm an Asian female. Because those things that make a good judge, your diligence, your attention to detail, your extent of legal research, your ability to see both sides of a situation, your commitment to fair, those things aren't unique to any gender or any race. So I think the really great judges don't have to be of different genders or diversities to be great judges. But I do think that the court, in order to have credibility, to have political capital with our society, has to be diverse. It has to reflect the community. Otherwise, it's almost implicitly an institution that is the product of biased selection processes. And without diversity, diversity brings in evidence that, okay, the selection process is a little bit more valid. The selection process has overcome some level of unconscious bias. The diversity in the court, in the bench, in its employees, in its management, that is a reflection of how much credibility the institution has as an institution that represents the community. And that's the importance of it. Not because it's better to have people of a certain race or gender. It's just that if you have representation as an institution, we can make better decisions. As an institution, we will be more respected. Those are just my opening salvos.
Thank you, Judge Hiramoto, very much. And thank you all. Sometimes I think, the theme that I was just jotting down some notes as each of you were talking, but what I constantly kind of heard was The challenge in even beginning the work, one, we're dealing with systems, right? Systems that have been around for a really long time. You know, the legal system obviously has its roots that date back to the founding, obviously, of this country. And, you know, there is obviously a litany of things that we can obviously point to. The system has obviously evolved, but the root of it, unfortunately, you know, really was to the disadvantage of people of color, really systematically created as a system that unfortunately did not treat people as equal and did not see people as equal. And so as we are having this conversation and pushing toward reconciliation, and we're thinking about, and it was mentioned as well, the challenge in even having the conversation, right? Where do you begin? How can we even get to reconciliation if we can't even start with the conversation that there is a problem? And I'm wondering, just to help our audience members this evening, maybe have tangible examples of what each of you mean. If you've had a personal challenge, a personal experience from either your practice or either on the bench, where you have felt kind of where there was an implicit attack, or you have felt that there was bias expressed or implied, or just even a resistance to talking about race and the importance of diversity and the conversation about race in your institutions and in your offices. Tracy, if you don't mind, I'll start with you.
This is kind of a tough one, and a little personal for me, for two reasons. First, I'll start with a situation that happened more than a couple of times in court, where I was mistaken for another African-American female attorney in our office. Even after correction, I guess I'm going to put the mistake in air quotes, it would continue. It was unfortunately an older male judge. And, you know, it always bothered me because I couldn't help but wonder, you know, is it just that he's older and he's not really paying attention, or is this intentional? And it was something that I struggled with for a long time. Later, I found was informed by other attorneys in our office who were also present in court in the same courtroom, that the other female attorney, there were two of them, were often called me, right, by the same judge. That was many, many years ago. And I think, unfortunately, we never brought it to the judge's attention other than to correct him when we were in court on the record, obviously. And I think there was a part of me that felt uncomfortable, if you will, bringing it up, because there were these underlying kind of, you know, things simmering under the surface, in the sense that I was new to the office, in the sense that I was a Black female attorney. And me bringing this up, there was a part of me that felt, well, maybe he will think that I am calling him a racist. And so it was just something that was kind of swept under the rug. Later on, as you know, I became more senior in the office, there were instances, excuse me, in the office where, as a person of color, we may have not felt supported. To our public defender's credit, she has taken pretty courageous strides, I would like to say, in the sense that she has kind of answered the calls, in the sense that our offices as an office felt that we needed more diversity in management. And she has done that. She has answered those calls. we wanted to bring more diversity into the office because we felt as people of color, we were underrepresented in the office, which was kind of, we felt, a slap in the face to our clients who unfortunately are primarily people of color. And she has taken great steps and strides, I think, in ensuring that we expand our reach. She has put people of color in positions to do recruiting. So I think some of those uncomfortable conversations that we've had in our office around race, around privilege, around implicit bias, although they have been extremely uncomfortable, they came with many tears, lots of frustration. I think the end result was worth it. And I'd like to see something similar happen in our court system, because it does impact not only our attorneys of color, but it also impacts the clients that we represent.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, tease something out a little bit more
Sure.
from your example. If being called or having, I'm assuming the other two women that you all were being mistaken for, you were all African-American women. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What did that mean to you, or even to the three of you, that you weren't being identified as Tracy Clark here on behalf of Mr. So-and-so, Tracy Clark, attorney at law, who is here on behalf of Mrs. Smith? As you, as individual women or practitioners in the office, what did that create for each of you, just even about your own identities in that courtroom? Is my question make sense?
Oh yeah,
Good.
it's funny that you use the words individual and identity, because I think that when those experiences happened, at least to me personally, I didn't feel like I was an individual. I did not feel as if I had an identity. I felt as if I was less than my colleagues who were not people of color that were before this judge. In addition to that, there's a dynamic that occurs between us as public defenders and our clients. And it was embarrassing, it was frustrating, it was hurtful to appear in court, be mistaken for another attorney on more than one occasion with my client present. And the feeling that created didn't go away when I left the courtroom. It was something that stayed with me. And when I say stayed with me, I mean, clearly it still bothers me because it's difficult for me to talk about even now. But it's not something that goes away. It's something that we have to remember, that we are forced to remember, faced with every single day when we walk into a courtroom. We're not individuals. We're seen first as a Black woman and then an attorney, instead of being seen as you said, Mr. Johnson's attorney. So yeah, I think that we weren't seen as individuals. We didn't feel like we had an identity, or at least I felt, at least momentarily, that was stripped away from me in that setting.
Thank you for
I just add that, because that happens to all of us Black women. We're called by, I'm called Miss Thomas so often, and I'm like, what do they even look like? But whatever. I am probably the opposite of Tracy in that I probably speak out more than I should. I don't brush stuff under the rug very well. But for me, it's a form of disrespect. If the judge were calling my white counterparts by other people's names, then that's one thing. But because it's only me, it's for me, it's just disrespectful that you aren't even taking the time to look at me. You don't even see me. You see a Black female lawyer, and to you, you relate that to Jermel Thomas. When no, I'm in a whole nother office. I'm not, or Brittany Armstrong, who hasn't worked in our office in 5 years. Like, you only see a Black female. It's just disrespectful to me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you
Yeah,
for
I
that.
feel the same.
Audrey, you've been nodding your head up and down the whole time, so I want to hear from you.
Well, I just wanted to add on. So same thing, and that happens also in the non-criminal world as well. There happens to be another Asian American woman who doesn't really even look like me, but people throughout the whole professional space, and I'm talking about bankers and financial advisors and all these other types of people who I get referrals from, and we're regularly confused. Aren't you that banker? And it's just, and then I get called that name and all those other sorts of things. And it happens, it does. And it for exactly what Tracy was saying. And thank you for articulating it so well in terms of being felt less than, because then you don't have that individuality of yourself and the profession and what you've accomplished professionally.
Or there's also the times when you are in court, no one else is in there, you and a defense attorney, and the judge comes out and was like, do you know where the other attorney is? Do you know where the DA is? Yeah, she's sitting right here. But just the assumption that I'm not the attorney.
Right.
It's kind of similar to that feeling.
And that's, Venus, I think you'd asked for just kind of examples. So, and I think that happens so often. I agree with you, Nichelle. So for me, it'll be going into when you're taking a deposition, and I can't even tell you how many times I've been asked, am I the receptionist? Can you get me some water? Where are the pencils kept? Or right, and those sorts of things. Or are you the court reporter? Or are you the paralegal? Rather than, no, you're the attorney. I had this one situation where my former firm, we'd had a paralegal who was a man, and he was older, and we both walked into the room, and of course, for the deposition room, and of course, everyone turned to him and then asked him when he was going to start, and just talked to him as if he was the attorney, and completely ignored me. And that, I think it's very common. It happens a lot.
Yeah. Judge Hiramoto, how about for you? You have mentioned, obviously in your opening remarks, that you are one of 2 Asian judges currently on the bench, either in your previous career, obviously in private practice, or even through your time on the bench. How have you experienced this? How does this show up for you? Oh, you're on mute, Judge.
So I'm sorry, Audrey, do you have those slides or about the
Okay. Yeah. So we put them all in the handouts. So
okay. So in the handouts, there's, first of all, in the handouts, there's the statistics that what we're talking about here is not anecdotal. Although, I mean, it is anecdotal, but it's backed up by actual statistics that cases, and I think the more serious one, not to say that what you're talking about is not serious. I think the thing about what Ms. Holmes talked about, where they don't even think you're a lawyer, I think that is sort of a quantum different, because at least mistaking you for another lawyer, they still think you're counsel. I'm not saying that it's not bad. It's still bad. But because it's happened to me, both of these things have happened to me. And if you want my perspective, I'm like, well, we've only got 90 minutes tonight, so I don't want to tell you all the experiences, but let me give you one example of each. So when I was at the law firm, I had my office across from the same partner for like 3 solid years. And one day, another Asian lawyer at the firm, Filipino, looks, as Audrey said, nothing like me, at least in my eyes. And she was 5 months pregnant, and I had never had a child. She came out of my office having left something for me, and he says, "Hi, Joni." And I was mistaken for her on the opposite. When I was pregnant and she wasn't, people called me her name. When I was at the SEC as a branch chief, I was taking testimony one day, and it's like a deposition. And the lawyer and his client came into the office, and the lawyer, I'm standing there in my suit, the binders on the table, we're in the deposition room, the court reporter set up. He looks at me and goes, "Can you get me a couple of cups of coffee?" Because he thought I was the receptionist.
Yes.
So I went to the coffee room. I don't drink coffee, or I didn't then. And I got 2 cups of coffee, and I got little sugars and creams and a little tray. And people were looking at me because I was a branch chief, and they were saying, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm getting coffee." And I took this little tray in and I put it in the deposition room and I served them their little coffee with their little stirs and assortment of sugars and non-sugar sweeteners. And then I sat down and I opened my binder and I swore the witness in as the attorney sat there and peed himself. So, I mean, you know, we don't always get that little bit of satisfaction, but I hope that he learned a lesson about making assumptions. And the reason I try and make a distinction between IDs for another lawyer is because I'm guilty of that myself. And although it happens to women and women of color far more often statistically than it does to men or to white men, and that's in the handouts. There was a male Jewish public defender, and I would call him by another male Jewish public defender's name every time. And I wasn't the only one. There were several judges on the bench that committed that offense. And the thing was, is I knew they weren't the same person. They didn't look alike, although they both had glasses, but you'd never mistake one for the other. It's just, so for me, I thought of it as a cross-racial ID thing, something, you know, I just didn't have the brain space, and I would write the name down and I would know that this person is coming in for prelim and be very, very careful. And I'm going to say one of the names because he's now Judge Goldstein. And so I said the wrong name one time and I apologized. It hadn't been the first time and I felt like an idiot. And he said, "That's okay, Judge Takahashi." So he gave me a little bit of my medicine. I'm hoping that was the last time I did that, but I knew that he was a lawyer. I knew they were both smart lawyers, and I'm not trying to, one thing I want to say is, just because I am the victim of bias doesn't mean I'm bias free. Right. And I say that so that I hope that white men out there or people of different races or what men of color, that they don't think that I'm like holding myself, I suffer more and, you know, and I'm so great and I don't have biases. I'm saying I have biases and I try and do my best. I am not perfect. And what people talk about when they talk about these experiences, Ms. Clark, Ms. Holmes, Ms. G, you have all articulated the pain, the real pain and the disrespect. And regardless of whether it's intended or not, these lawyers are starting behind the starting line with the other counsel to any objective observer. And to an objective observer, it looks like your courtroom is not a level playing field because you have exhibited bias. Now, because you haven't taken the time to, you know, show respect and courtesy on an equal footing. So, and I, you know, I'm not saying that, I'm saying that even if you don't intend harm, there is harm. And so it's something we all have to work on.
Can I just add really too, like if you take the situations individually, they seem kind of minor and something you can get over. But when you take them as a whole and when you deal with this kind of thing, or in my opinion, disrespect or microaggressions, like multiple times a day, it just kind of builds up. So what may appear to a person on the outside to be a very minor thing, for me, it might be a huge thing. It might be the last straw. I'm just tired. I don't want to do this anymore. And so it may, you have to understand like these things from the time you knew that you were Black, whatever age you were when you realized, you know, when you have to walk in a room and survey the room every time to see, is there going to be another Black person in here? Or am I going to be the only one? Are they going to make me try and speak for the race today? Like when you have those situations all the time, it just builds up and it might seem small, but it's really not small.
Two quick things.
Oh, I'm sorry, Venus. Can I just want to throw in one little tagline?
Sure, Judge.
I have a cousin who is a director and filmmaker in LA, and he did a story, a collection of stories one time, and the title of it is as explaining our point. You mean to tell me you still don't know who we are?
No, thank you for that. Very poignant. The stat, Judge, that you're referring to, I want to read out loud just so, because it's very relevant, and I have it here in front of me. This is from the Commission on Women in the Profession, Minority Corporate Counsel Association. This is from 2019. Female lawyers of color are 8 times more likely than white men to report that they had been mistaken for custodial staff, administrative staff, or court personnel, with 57% reporting mistaken identity. Over 50% of white men had also experienced this type of bias, while only 7% of white male lawyers were mistaken for non-lawyers. So to your point, Judge, and to yours, Nichelle, this is real. And it manifests itself in many different ways. I had an experience as a very young lawyer. I might have been 5 or 6 years into practice, got a file, was asked to go down to a courtroom to take a plea really quickly, something very common, ran to the courtroom, went in chambers with the judge and the defense attorney. And the judge says, Ms. Johnson, you know, sounds good. So this is what we'll do. We'll go out, we'll put it on the record. And he might've said a couple other things and we'll go from there. No problem. I'm walking out of the judge's chambers first. The defense attorney is behind me and the judge was coming kind of from around his desk. So probably a few steps behind. And for some of you, you will know what this reference is automatically. The white male, older white male attorney behind me said, you go out there and you do just what you're supposed to do, little tar baby. Like a good little tar baby. And for those who may not know what a tar baby is, it is an extremely racially charged, inflammatory term that is used for Blacks and African Americans during the time of slavery, during the time of Jim Crow, essentially, that we are mignettes and puppets and we're just kind of there doing whatever the authoritative figure tells us to do. And I literally stopped in my tracks because obviously generationally, it's not a term that I would have ever heard, right? I am not of you know, the 60s and you know, a time even before then where maybe that term might have been used, but I knew what the term meant, obviously. And anyway, I reported it up, and thankfully my boss at the time wrote a letter to the state bar and reported the individual. And so thankfully, at least I felt supported in that. But I guess I just want people to know that it's not just mistaken identities, it's mistaken identities. It is offensive and derogatory terms. It is me walking into courtrooms and I'm the DA and I'm being mistaken automatically if there is a young male in the room for the defendant's mother. And not that I would be.
How about the one where we're always not qualified, right? And so I'm going to speak on, so when Dinah was appointed, she was initially appointed by the Board of Supervisors. Like there was this, and I think it's common knowledge that a lot of lawyers in the office didn't support her. They supported Paul Graves. And they were like blatantly in the hallway having discussions about her not being qualified. They were upset by the appointment. And I was just like, how do you talk about your boss openly in the hallway? Because you didn't do that for Mark Peterson, who's a convicted felon. You never talked bad about him openly in the hallway. You might have talked, but you went in your office and you closed your door. But how do you feel privileged enough to go in these open audiences and just be disrespectful to the person who is now the district attorney, right? And to say somehow she's not qualified, that narrative like outraged me. And it came from everybody, to all walks of people, who would say that somehow she's not qualified to have the position. But yet we're up for re-election again and she's done an amazing job, right? So always somehow, you know, Black women, you know, we're either here to mark a box or we're, you know, here from affirmative action or we're not qualified. There's been a couple times in the office when somebody has said something to me and I've had to remind them, oh, I passed the bar on the first time. It took you 3 times. Like, let's come on now, no, we're not gonna do that. So it makes me infuriated that somehow we have to, we got to be twice as hard. We got to work be twice as prepared as everybody else just to come across and just to have that equal playing field.
Yeah, and that was to Judge Hiramoto's point, right? That you're automatically kind of starting, right, several steps behind the start line, right? We're not only women of color, but we're also women, right, on top of it. So all of this is very intersectional, right? We are not just single beings, and we bring our whole selves to our work every single day. And to that point, our jobs are stressful enough. We have all obviously taken on very important roles of service, whether it be criminally, whether it be on the bench, whether it be in civilly or in private practice. It is still an act of service to be an attorney. The jobs are stressful enough. Does any of this or these experiences for any of you create kind of physical manifestations, right, for you? Exhaustion, anger, wanting to give up, wanting to quit, not feeling comfortable to be in spaces anymore. And so perhaps you withdraw from speaking out. And Tracy, I'd love to hear from you. Does that happen to you? And if so, how do you address it? How do you keep going and keep fighting?
I mean, I think to say that, it doesn't affect you is basically a bold-faced lie. It affects you to the level it affects you may be different for different people. As a woman of color, it's funny because I had a conversation earlier with Kiana about how it didn't seem as stressful when you were younger, when you were in high school, when you were even in college. I think what happens though is that the higher up you go in your profession or your career, when you are a person of color, you are, I think, overwhelmingly a minority. You are a minority by gender a lot of times, and you are a minority by race. And you feel alien, as Nichelle mentioned earlier. You walk into the room, very few people look like you. And in my current profession, I can still say that, with the exception of my clients, right? Most of my clients, unfortunately, are brown and black-skinned people. Other than that, the people that are in the same profession that I am in, they don't look like me. The people on the bench, very few of them look like me. Mm-hmm. Even in the prosecutor's office, very few of them, I can count on one hand, look like me. Mm-hmm. And so it's difficult when issues of race, of gender come up in court, and you feel that it is a personal attack on you. You carry that with you home. You carry that with you when you're talking with your family. Even if you don't talk about it, you carry it on the inside. For me, it manifests itself physically in the sense that I suffer from migraine headaches, and oftentimes I will feel as if they are getting worse. There are times when I just go into my office and I have to close my door and close my blinds, kind of shut myself off so that I can decompress. The way that I have dealt with it, I think, over the years is you have to have an outlet. If you don't have that support system at home, you have to have an outlet, whether that outlet be meditation or exercise or something. You have to have an outlet to release that, because if you do not, you will get sick. You will get physically sick. There have been situations that have been extremely stressful in court, in my profession, in the office. And I can tell you, quite frankly, that it definitely manifests itself. Some people, have therapy sessions, but you definitely do need an outlet in order to be able to come back and fight another day.
That's right. Thank you. Audrey, how about for you? Has any of this caused or created or resulted in, kind of just physically impacting you in one way or another?
It was really powerful what Tracy just shared. And you know, my heart was just, I wanted to give you a big hug right then when I was listening to all of those things. Certainly, I think it swirls around all of us, right? When we're made to feel in that other capacity. And when Tracy, when you'd said that, it just really hit home. Like sometimes for the first time when I meet people, and I've been active in the bar, so I know a lot of you and we speak a lot. But for people who I meet the first time, more often than not, like maybe 90% of the time, the first question people will say is, "What are you?" And I'll say, "Oh, well, I'm a lawyer, or I'm a woman." I'll just kind of come up with that answer. And then the next question is, "Well, no, I mean, really, what are you? Like, where did you come from?" And I said, "Oh, I live in Walnut Creek." No, 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 that's not what I meant. I meant, where were you born? "Oh, I was born in San Francisco." Right. And it kind of goes this way.
Go on and on and on.
Where was your mom born? Where were your parents born? "Oh, well, my mom was born near Fresno." No, no. Right. And then it kind of comes out with, "Oh, they're really," and I'll say, "Oh, are you really trying to ask me, what is my ethnicity?" And they'll say, "Yeah, you really look like a Hawaiian person. Are you Hawaiian?" And oftentimes there's really no ill intent and people are curious, right? And I'm glad when people are curious, and I'll try to rope it around that way to kind of diffuse a situation. But what it does is that they see Asians or other people of color as an other, right? As an other. And you're not American because you're Chinese first, right? So I'm 100% Chinese, I guess you could say, right? A Chinese American. 5 generations on my mom's side, 2nd generation on my dad's side. But that's the common refrain in terms of you're not American, right? You don't really belong here. And then that leads to what we've seen so much of in this Asian hate, like huge rise. And in your materials, you'll see there's a recent report. And last year, I think that there were some documented, like almost 4,000 instances of hate crimes against Asian Americans. And then in the last 2 months, it's like doubled. And so people are getting acid thrown on them, their heads being hit by hammers, all of these sorts of things for the Asian American community, because we're other and we're not human beings. And so that's when it starts getting out of hand. I'll also get commonly asked or commonly said and complimented of, "Oh, your English is really good. You speak it so well," right? And it's like, well, that's the language that I grew up with and the only one that I know how to speak, except for maybe some high school French. But it's the assumption from people that you don't belong here and you're not part of it. And so that's a big deal when you feel like you want to participate as an American, you want to participate as a citizen, and yet the population is holding you back. And then, right, so people who I love and as part of my family were afraid right now to step foot outside in the public area if you're older, because there may be this, right, people coming just to get you because of how you look. And people are saying, "Oh, it's that Kung flu," and conflating being Asian with essentially being the coronavirus. And that is being said so often. So it's a terrible thing to have to deal with.
Yeah, thank you. Nichelle, how about for you?
When I first started in the Contra Costa DA's office, it really felt like family. Like I felt I didn't experience any or didn't notice any blatant mistreatment or bias or anything. And one of my favorite judges told me that's because they think you're the exception. So since Dinah has been there, it has completely changed 180. And people that I thought that I could trust, I don't trust anymore. So I had someone take a screenshot. I made a post about my son and how I have a 20-year-old son, but this was a few years ago. And I made a post about being afraid of him out with his friends and having law enforcement contact, because even though I teach him what to do, that doesn't mean he'll do it. And he might do all the right things and still lose his life, right? That's just the reality of the world that we live in. And so they took that post and sent it to some, I'm gonna say the Klan paper, but redstate.com. And they posted my Facebook page and like wrote this whole article about me and my son and how it was like anti-law enforcement. And people in the comments were like making threatening remarks toward me and my child. Like that's my safety. That's my family, right? And so I felt very, very uncomfortable. Thank God for the pandemic. I don't have to go in every day. And so I don't like have to see people that make me uncomfortable. We had a whole situation with the merit board and just being drugged into a bunch of drama that I really had nothing to do with, but it's because, I don't know if it's because I'm Black or because I support Dinah or both, that I'm somehow targeted. So, and I'm very vocal about how I feel. If I feel like something is being done unjustly, regardless of the situation, if I'm in court and a judge says something, I'm putting it on the record. I'm not the person to brush it under the rug, not me. So I'm very vocal, and that might come against me at sometimes or hurt me because of that. And so it might make me more of a target. This recording might make me a target. I really don't care. I have thought about, leaving the office because I'm just uncomfortable. It's not a place that I really want to be. I don't enjoy it like I used to, and I don't feel safe there. And I like to, when you go to work, you want to feel like you're in an environment where you're safe. And I don't feel that way now. And it's sad and unfortunate, but I am there at least to support Dinah. So they're stuck with me for a while.
Judge, how about for you? Yeah, I mean, I'm going to hold on to that example of you with the creams and the sugars and, probably the Splenda and the real sugar and maybe the raw sugar and the stirs and then you, right, began orchestrating and the meeting or the testimony, as you said. So that is going to be a little piece of power that I hold on to. Any other examples of maybe how you've been able to pull your power back? Because that was an example of you pulling your power back to you.
So that is a great question. I first want to extend on something that Nichelle said, because it was really important. She said just now, I don't know if it was because I'm Black or because I'm a woman or because I support Dinah. And that's the problem. The burden is on the abused person to identify what this is. If I suffer some huge disrespect, people would say, well, maybe it's because you look young. Maybe it's not because you're a woman or because you're Asian. Do you know why he said that? Am I the mind reader? No, I have suffered
something to make him say that or feel that way.
Yeah, exactly. Did you provoke it? I mean,
must have been a short skirt.
Right.
Yeah, why is the burden on the person who received this horrible abuse to have to identify what the motives were of the abuser? I mean, I just don't get that.
Yeah.
And so let me get to your question, Ms. Johnson. So examples, let me, in the interest of time. So I have felt very alone on this bench in 1998. In 2000, Judge Sugiyama was elected, and there was never any bad blood between us or anything. He's a very introverted person. And, it wasn't like we were super close friends. I adore the man, and I always have had a huge amount of respect for him. But it wasn't until 2017, when Judge Reyes was appointed, that there was sort of like this minimum number that was required to make me feel like there was an Asian community on the bench. And then Judge Lai was appointed, and I can't tell you how happy I was to have another Asian woman on the bench. I wrote her this little plaque that said, honey, I've waited 20 years for you. You're the newer, better me. You're Hiramoto 2.0. And I am so proud to have such a powerful and brilliant person, as an Asian woman on the bench. And it really killed me when she left, but that's another story. But when you say in terms of taking back your power, it does cause, like people have discussed, rage, depression, and stress, like any other traumatic violations. And so the things that help those things can help you recover from any kind of trauma. Therapy, medication, finding your passion is one big deal for me. And one of my passions is raising my family. Another of mine is horseback riding. And I live to ride, and fortunately I don't have to ride to live. But another thing that I do is, and this comes from Audrey's point, people ask, where are you from? And I say, Alta Bates Hospital. Where were your parents from? Richmond, California, and Lodi, California. No, where, they want to other you. And so I turn that around. And by the way, this is something that Asians can say to Asians and other non-Asians. You might be perceived as expressing a healthy interest because maybe you spent a year in Taiwan teaching English. Maybe you have some connection to some Asian culture and you're trying to build a bridge. But unless you have some reason for wanting to build a bridge, some experience that ties you in, it can be perceived as what she was talking about, othering. But what I do is I draw on that. My ancestors came to this country as tenant farmers and nursery people. My parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins were incarcerated because they were of Japanese descent, even though some of them were American citizens. And they all suffered, and they all made sacrifices to try and show they were good American citizens. And I am not going to quit. That's how I get my power back. They suffered for me, and I am not going to let their suffering and their sacrifice be in vain. So when I feel like giving up, and all of you have family who have done that for you, and it doesn't matter if you're, all of you, white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, all the races, all of us, we're lawyers because people sacrifice to get us where we are. And I draw on that to get some of my power back. And another thing I do is, and we all have this too, or we should, or call me if you need one, a BFF to talk me off the ledge. So I received a treatment in an email just recently, and I decided that this was just blatantly unfair, and it was. And I had to text my BFF and say, you got to talk me off the ledge, because I am going to go in there and commit 50,000 ethical violations, by just letting it all loose. But, like Nichelle says, it builds up. Mm-hmm. So you need a BFF to talk you off the ledge and to remind you that your self-worth is not dependent on them. Your self-worth comes from you. And it's not their job to make you happy, and it's not their job to give you self-worth. You got to get that on your own. And we are all lawyers because we have that. To some degree, we have that. So that's how I do it. I call my BFF. I ride horses, I get hugs from my kids, and my kids are older, so they never come running anymore. If you have kids that are young enough that they come running when you come home, you better treasure that. Take some videos and stuff, because when it stops, it doesn't happen ever again. And that's why people get dogs. So I have a wonderful 3-year-old husky, and she comes every day. She comes over, Mom, you're home. So do what you need to do to make you feel better in the short run, to make you feel better in the long run.
Great, thank you all. Very insightful and enlightening, and good reminders for self-care, right? Taking care of yourself so that we can do the work and take care of others. There's been something else that I kind of want to tease out a little bit more, and we've touched on it from the very beginning, around trying to have these conversations, right, in our workplaces and with our colleagues, but not at the same time feeling like we are the ambassadors that, one, have all the answers, and two, as Judge Hiramoto just said, if I'm the person that has constantly been on the receiving end, right, of the disrespect or the isolated or the other, right, feelings, why is it my job to fix this? But then the question then becomes, whose job is it? So I throw it out there. Where do we go from here? Tracy, I'm going to come back to you.
Boy, I don't know, but we got to go somewhere because where we are right now is not healthy. It is not working.
Yeah.
I think that what we all need to do, you're right. I talked about this at the very beginning, that it's frustrating for me when people come to me and assume that I have the answers, that I can come up with this solution that's going to fix everything. I think that we all need to kind of let our guards down, not be defensive, open up our hearts and our minds, and come together as a community to start talking about these things. I think we need to stop taking things so personally. It's difficult to have a conversation about race in particular, because I think people assume automatically that no matter what you say, they get defensive and assume that you're calling them a racist. And I think that that's where we need to start. We need to not become so personal with all of this so that we can start a conversation. It's funny, this has been a bone of contention since this whole movement started, in that I have had this conversation with many, many people. When they talk about Black Lives Matter, for instance, there is this notion that when one says Black Lives Matter, that people that are saying it are saying no one else's life matters, or that Black lives are more important than any other life. And so then we have the clapback of, well, Blue Lives Matter too, or All Lives Matter. And it's funny because the more and more I think about it, when we say things like Black Lives Matter, I kind of analogize it with someone saying, cancer sucks, right? Or someone saying breast cancer sucks, or fuck breast cancer, excuse my language. You don't hear people come back and say, well, what about leukemia? Or what about brain cancer? We need to have that same kind of open-mindedness when we talk about race, when we talk about gender discrimination or gender bias. We need to have those same types of open-minded, defenseless conversations in order to start the big conversation. I'm not saying it's not going to be painful. I'm not saying it's not going to be uncomfortable, but I think that that's where we start.
Thank you. Nichelle, would love to hear from you.
I've always said that, we need to have the conversations, right? We all have those implicit biases. Some are based on experience or lived experiences. Some are based on stereotypes that we've just ingrained. But the conversations need to be had so that you can understand. I'm constantly having a conversation about what I go through as a Black parent. I had a situation where somebody questioned me because I go in the community and I teach Know Your Rights, and how they thought that was inappropriate because why would I teach these criminals or whatever Know Your Rights? And I'm like, well, you go home and you teach your son what to do if he's ever encountered the police, or why wouldn't you want others in a community? Why don't they deserve to have that same information, right? I don't understand. Anyway, I never could really articulate what that was about. But that's one thing that I try to, my lived experience as a Black mother. White mothers, white fathers, you don't have that. You don't sit up at night and wait for your son to get home to make sure he's home before you can comfortably go to bed. You don't have that small panic attack when you call and don't answer, or he calls you and tells you he's being pulled over by the police. Like, the experience that I have as just a Black mother is traumatic in and of itself. And I think about this a lot too, because I wonder how much of that do I impose on my son, right? How much of my fear and anxiety, because he chilling, he don't even like pay attention as much as I do, but I'm constantly drilling him. No, make sure that tail light is fixed. Like, you don't want to, like, you can't have nothing wrong with your car. You can't have, don't speed. Make sure you hit, and no, absolutely, you cannot have a gold grill. Absolutely not. You have a, where's your belt? Like, constantly, because he's a Black man. He already got 2 strikes, right? And so my over control nature always kicks in. So for me, it's just about trying to share my perspective, just to get other people around me to understand what I go through just as a Black, let alone a Black lawyer. Like, that's a whole separate thing.
Right.
So I try to share those experiences, start those conversations as a way of educating. And so those people that are close to me in the office, who are white, we talk a lot about white privilege. I try to explain to them why I say something might be white privilege, just to be safe enough to have those conversations, I think is where we start, right? Having the tough conversations.
Nichelle, I don't think you are being overly protective or kind of pouncing on your son. The conversations that you're having with your son as a Black mother of sons, those conversations we have with our sons at 5 years old, when they probably at 5 years old would never have contact with the police. But we have those conversations with them about basic things that I think our white female counterparts, it's not even a blip on their radar, like,
Yeah.
Don't put your hood on your hoodie up. I know
Right.
there's a hood on your hoodie, do not put it up. When you're stopped by the police, your hands 10 and 2.
Yep.
Yes, sir. No, sir. Don't make any furtive movements. These are scary conversations that we have with our children. And even if the scariest thing I think for us is even if they do all of those things right, we follow it to the letter, that still is not a guarantee that at the end of the night, they're coming home. And so I think that, while I am grateful for this movement that has finally started, it is long overdue. We have a lot of work to do. People get upset when you say defund the police because they jump to the extreme and assume that means we no longer want police. And that's not what this is about. This is about education, right? This is about putting resources where they are best served. And I think through conversations, we can get those points across to people so that they understand and so that we do move closer to a resolution, to some sort of solution to this problem.
I think it's exactly, all the things that both of you just said. I think as a bar association, right, and I was president in 2012, we've made so much progress. And Kiana has been the person who spearheaded this racial reconciliation forum. And I think it's exactly these types of things where people can speak, and for people who haven't had our experiences or your experiences, Nichelle, for people who've lived privileged lives, but who are open-minded and want to learn, all of a sudden a door opens in people's minds where they go, oh, you mean we're talking about physical safety, not just being offended by calling someone a different name. And all of a sudden that just changes people's mindset, or I'm hopeful that that changes people's mindset when we're at places like, when we're at forums like this. And we have so many people who are showing up. Robin Pearson had done fantastic work when she was president in terms of spearheading the diversity section. And then later on the diversity committee, and it was been promoted by other people as well. But it really wasn't, the time wasn't ripe at that point in time. And now it's being embraced by the larger community. So I am hopeful in terms of what I'm seeing just by the number of people who are attending tonight, right? That we're moving in the right direction and that people are listening and people are listening to the stories that we have.
Judge, would love your thoughts as well, please. Where do
Thank
we
you.
go from here?
Yeah, I think where we go from here is, so first of all, I don't think that by definition, I honestly believe none of the people in this program here tonight are racist. But I think the challenge is to define where we all want to be in terms of being anti-racist, or in terms of being an ally to any person in a position of less power than someone else, whether it's because of domestic abuse or whether it's because of a race or gender or any other kind of situation. I think that programs like this, in the materials, for example, we put this set of slides, the 5 Ds of what to do if you see anti-Asian hate. These are applicable for any kind of hate,
Right.
or any kind of bullying, but it's the iteration that came out because of the Asian hate events, or I'm sorry, incidents that have been happening. But I think there are things that you can do. Like Audrey, I was so happy that you mentioned the Asian hate, the rise in the need for an anti-Asian hate movement. And I think I was really touched the other day when someone came to just sort of shoot the breeze and was talking to me about professional stuff, and just as a side question said, Judge, how are you doing in this era of anti-Asian hate? And that slew me, because it really is affecting me.
Yeah.
And I tell my elder relatives, you are not walking outside at night. I don't care if you live in Berkeley, the most liberal city, things happen everywhere. There were, stabbings in San Francisco a few weeks ago, and it has always been there. I mean, the anti-owning property laws and all that. I mean, as long as there have been Asians in this country, there has been Asian hate. And, but is it affecting me now more than ever? Yeah, it is. Just ask us. We may need someone to talk to, and if we don't, we'll let you know. It's like, yeah, it's affecting me, but I'm doing okay. Let's go to Starbucks and have some coffee, or like, if someone tells you a story like the ones that were shared tonight that almost had me in tears, you can ask questions like, how did that make you feel? You can inquire, you can validate. You may not have been through something like that, but you could say, that sounds horrible. That sounds terrible. And you can validate what they're going through, instead of calling, are you sure it wasn't because you're a woman and not because you're Black? Instead of questioning it or asking them to mind read the abuser's motives, validate the pain that they have gone through. And don't make denying statements like, in 20 years, things will all be better. I grew up in the 60s and I used to believe that. I somehow believed in this linear progression for social justice and change, and I don't anymore. So be anti-racist. I think there are materials out, there's stuff in our materials that you can do to educate yourself. There are, and like, I don't know everything, right? So there's a couple of pages that I watch. One of them, Very Smart Brothers, and one of them, The Root. And, there are pages where real cutting edge conversations are happening. And I don't say much because I would rather open my ears and listen to the differing debates that are going on, and just learn that way. So if any of this has made you feel like, yeah, this is something you want to do, and make a change in your life, look at the written materials, because there's things that you can do just, on the spur of the moment when something happens in front of you, or by reaching out to a friend, or by joining a committee. There are things all of us can do. I'm not just talking to the white males here, I'm talking to all of us. I think our networking and our groups really do make a difference. And I also want to thank Kiana for inviting me to participate in this, because it is really a luxury to be able to express myself on these topics, but also just, we're all so busy, just to force myself to stop and collect my thoughts and to see what it is that others have to say and what I may want to say. So I really can't thank you enough, Kiana. This is really a remarkable event, and I really am honored to have been part of it.
Absolutely, Judge. Thank you so much. You're actually reading my mind, because I was going to ask kind of, that is my little one, so I'm sorry if you can hear him screaming. But I was going to ask each of you in 60 seconds or less to share with me, or to share with the group, for our allies, for folks who are looking for a way to help or to step up but just don't know how. What do you say to them? Judge, I think you gave us some excellent tips, but if Tracy or Audrey or Nichelle, you have any thoughts, please.
I think what Judge Hiramoto said is like getting involved is very important. No matter how tired I am, I'm very active in the legal community, and as the president of the Charles Houston Bar Association, we collaborate a lot with the other affinity bars. And I think that just helps in that collaborative effort. We're doing something with bailiff around Pride and Juneteenth and the intersectionality of that. We're doing a Stop Asian Hate event. So just coming together and just feeling like you're doing something or contributing can sometimes help you just feel like you're having an impact. Donating to organizations that may be, in doing the work also helps, just to make you feel like you've kind of had an impact. Like, it's just hard for me, and we do a lot of things around mental health as well, because I don't know how many more times I could see George Floyd die. I mean, it's just like, just repeat cycle of, and it's traumatic to watch. But then to come back the next day and then you see another person being shot in the back, or, and it's an overwhelming effect. And so one of the ways that I kind of deal with it is to be involved in the legal community, to feel like I'm giving back, to feel like I'm having an impact, to really kind of increase diversity in the legal field. I'm always talking to young law students. I am very, I don't care what side you're on. If I see you are African-American and you in the same courthouse as me, we're gonna have a conversation. I don't care if you work for the public defender's office, where you work. I'm happy no matter what side you're on, just so long as you are feeling supported. You can call me as a resource. And that's a part of what I think is gonna have an impact too, is just increasing that diversity in the legal profession, and us being each other's resource. No matter what side we're on or what we do, we still need to be there for each other, because the same way that I feel isolated, other people feel isolated as well. And it shouldn't matter that you're in the DA's office or I'm in the DA's office and you're in the public defender's office. That shouldn't matter, right? And so I'm very intentional about making sure that, if I see you, I'm giving you my number, we're having a conversation. I can, if you want to be a PD, let me call my friends over there and see if I can get you in. Robin knows I'm always like, hey, what you doing? Robin, no, I love her. She's done a great job. I'm so excited about, some of the new faces that I've seen. And when I see them in the courtroom, I'm giving them my number. I'm inviting them to a Charles Houston meeting. I'm, getting involved. So I think that for me, it's just really taking a proactive role and making sure that not only do we get, the opportunity, but we feel supported once we get here.
Absolutely. Audrey, please.
So well said, Nichelle. It's funny, when I was reading all these things on the Stop Asian Hate. And there was so many blog posts and articles that were written by people who said, this is the very first time I've ever written. And, I've been told to not say anything. And I've been told to just sweep it under the rug and not make a problem and look the other way. And so many people are saying this right now. And then it's like this dam has burst and now people have to say things. And there's this critical mass, right? And then that people are listening. So much of it is that voices need to be heard. So much of it is that people need to just reach out, right? So if you're on the other side, if you're not a person of color, reach out. And I find when I was a junior lawyer, when I felt like there was maybe an old boys network and I wasn't included, that the Inns of Court was fantastic. In addition to our bar association. And I cannot say enough fantastic things about being involved at the committee level or wherever. But when you're working with people through either events or other stuff, not just a, shake your hand and how are you type of thing, but actually working side by side with people on whatever that project is, all of a sudden you're breaking down those barriers of otherness, and you're also becoming a friend and an ally. And those are things that help move us forward. So that's what I would encourage people to do. And just like Nichelle, I love to help people who are coming along. And so if you feel that you're alone out there or you need someone to talk to, I am here. And I am happy to field those calls or just reach out, because really, that's the way we make our world a better place.
You and Tracy, please, let's close us out.
That what I would offer is stop being silent. Whether your silence is verbal or by deed, just stop. Do something. Judge Hiramoto's listed I guess an organization where you could at least start. If you Google anti-racist groups, there's all kinds of ways that you can be part of making us better. I think it's important to do something. We've sat far too long on the sidelines, watching, not getting involved for whatever that reason is. Now is the time for us to stop being silent.
Thank you for that. And to our audience members who showed up tonight, you showing up is doing something. So this conversation is us doing something, right? So these are tangible examples, and we have to keep doing the something. And so to Tracy's point, kind of when you, like the bags in the airport, right? If you see something, say something that looks right, fishy or shouldn't be there. If you're a witness to a situation that is making you kind of uncomfortable and you're not the direct target of it, it's for sure making the direct target extremely uncomfortable. So maybe speak up for that person. If you see something happening, be a diffuser, right? Call it out when you see it. Create allyships in real moments directly by building relationships with people. We can do the work. It's not going to happen overnight. But us being all here tonight is us moving the needle forward. So thank you all. Kiana, I'm going to turn it back over to you in case you have any closing thoughts, but thank you for pulling us all together and making tonight happen.
Thank you so much, Venus, for agreeing to moderate this. And thank you so much to Audrey, Nichelle, Tracy, and Judge Hiramoto for participating. I do want to add a little bit of a closing remark about Michael Caesar, who was planned to be on this panel. Unfortunately, he experienced some driving while Black experience. He gave me permission to share that with you. And he's just devastated. And he was so devastated that he could not sit on the panel and talk about these issues for his own mental health. So my thoughts, and I'm sure all of our thoughts and prayers go out to him for what he's going through. These things that have been discussed, as you might have heard from the motion and everybody's voices, have real impact on the people who are suffering with these issues. And I really do encourage people to get involved and help fight to end racial discrimination, because it really is an issue that has a real impact on real people. So good night, everybody. I really appreciate all of you who came and participated and listened and participated in the chat. We look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you.
Thank you.